Hi, general psychology students. The purpose of this video is to begin to talk about Chapter 7, the Thinking and Intelligence chapter. And this second video makes up for the class that we missed on October 26th because of the ice storm. So watch the other video first because that finishes the memory chapter, and then you can watch this one. And hopefully you'll have watched this one before we meet on Tuesday, November 3rd for class. Okay, I'm now going to use the share function so that we can look at the PowerPoint slides for thinking and intelligence. So in the first slide, we're going to get the definition of intelligence. So intelligence is the all-purpose ability to do well on cognitive tasks, to solve problems, and to learn from experience. That's what intelligence is. Now I'm going to begin, well, I'm not just going to begin, I'm going to begin and end today in this video talking about all of the different theories of intelligence. And you're going to see how they become more and more complex, more and more multidimensional. So the first theory we're going to talk about is the simplest one, and it says that there's one thing, intelligence is one thing, they call it the G factor, G for general. It's a single general factor for mental ability that was assumed to underlie intelligence in early theories. So it's just one factor, intelligence, they called it the G factor. You could measure it, you either had it or you didn't have it. And it was sort of thought that once it's measured, it's going to be relatively stable. And that remains true, that it is relatively stable, even in some of the more complex ways that we measure it now. But now most of us see intelligence as something that can definitely change and grow and adapt as you change and grow and adapt, as you learn different things and try to acquire new skills. That it's not something that you're like born with and that's it, there you go, it's not going to improve. But the G factor sees intelligence as a single general factor for mental ability. Now the next theory we're going to talk about is called Cattell's theory of intelligence. And with Cattell, he identified two different kinds of intelligence. One he called crystallized intelligence. And this is like how good you are at acquiring knowledge and being able to get it in and get it out. So if you do well on like the SAT, on the vocabulary part of the SAT, you're showing that you're good at crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence, however, is this ability to see complex relationships among and between things and to solve problems. Tackling more complex, abstract challenges is part of fluid intelligence. So I like the words that he uses here. Crystallize, you can think of something that's crystallized, it's static, it's not going to move. Do you know this or do you not know it? And some people are really good at solving these things that are very concrete. They're there, you move them around or you don't move them around. Fluid intelligence is more like creativity and seeing the relationships between things. However, after Cattell came along, Sternberg came along and he had the triachic theory of intelligence. He says, no, there's not just two pieces like Cattell thinks. He thinks, no, there's three. Sternberg also comes up with the triangular theory of love, and he's got another triangular theory. It's really big into triangles. So the three parts, he believes that intelligence is made up of three different kinds of intelligence. That we have practical intelligence, that's that street smart, common sense. Creative intelligence, our ability to innovate and be creative and imaginative and solve problems with unique ways. And then analytical intelligence, are we good at problem solving and math and computation? And so a lot of the SAT measures analytical intelligence. Creative intelligence could be looked at if you look at how creative someone was in their designing of an experiment. And practical intelligence is, how good is someone at figuring out how to get people to participate in the experiment and get sort of the nuts and bolts of the experiment done. So practical intelligence, common sense, street smarts, creative intelligence, inventing, creativity, innovation, analytic intelligence, your ability to analyze, evaluate, judge, compare, contrast. A lot of the things that we teach in college look at analytic intelligence. But then it gets even more complicated with Gardner's multiple intelligences. And this is the one that I think many people in psychology really like, looking at Gardner's multiple intelligences. And he says that if you're going to look at intelligence, there's not just one, the general intelligence. There's not just two, although that's helpful. And there's more than three that are important. He's going to come up with a whole bunch of intelligence, Gardner is. And if you go, let me stop share real quick. If you go to your Blackboard course shell, you'll see on the Blackboard course shell a handout. So I'm under course content here. I clicked course content and it gave me this. And if you scroll down, you'll come to this multiple intelligence handout. And if you click on this handout, it actually will give you a survey to take, and at the bottom it will tell you how to analyze it, and you'll be able to figure out where you are, what your totals are for the different kinds of intelligence that Gardner had created or has identified. So let's go back to his intelligence. So I'm going to go through each of these, but really I think it would be useful for you to go and take that questionnaire, take that survey. You don't get any credit for it, it's just for fun, but it's also for self-knowledge. So from doing it, you'll be able to see how you score on each of these kinds of intelligence. So one kind of intelligence is musical intelligence, your sensitivity to music, sounds, tonal patterns. One of the other women who teaches general psychology, Carrie Stevens in the psychology department, she can memorize the words to almost every song. If she'll be in Walmart and there's a song playing, even if she hasn't heard it in 10 years, she can start singing all the words to the song. I get even songs I love and listen to all the time, I get the words all mixed up. So my son is really, really high in musical intelligence. From a very young age, he could play the piano very easily. If I needed him to memorize anything, all you had to do is put it to song and he'd grab it in a second. Another kind of intelligence is bodily kinesthetic intelligence. This is the ability to think in movement and to use your body in a skilled and complicated ways. These are our dancers, our runners, our athletes. These are people who can get their bodies to really do incredible things. My son also, when he was growing up, was a really good dancer. He doesn't really dance anymore. But if I needed him to memorize words, more than just a few, and it didn't seem like a song was the way to do it, to have him move his body around with it, come up with some kind of dance that it went with, and he could memorize it so much more quickly that way. But also, when Gardner's talking about multiple intelligence, the bodily kinesthetic intelligence is your ability to move your body really well, not just to memorize lists of words by using your body, like the example I use with my son, but it's that some people are better able, they're more intelligent in their body movements than others. So someone who can easily grasp dances, someone who can on the football field switch back very quickly and be able to implement something that the coach gave them, a play that the coach gave them. This would be someone who scores high in bodily kinesthetic intelligence. There's also logical mathematical intelligence. This is when you're good at solving logical problems, cause and effect connections. People who are good at math problems will score high in logical mathematical intelligence. When you look at the SAT or the ACT, there's a part that has to do with math. People that are high in logical mathematical intelligence also will tend to score high on that portion of the SAT or the ACT. Then there's linguistic intelligence. This is the thinking in words and using language to express and understand complex meanings. So people who are good at this are likely to be English majors. They love to read and write and poets, and they're great at coming up with, not just coming up with interesting ways to explain things, but the way they explain it is going to be interesting. And so they use language and words very well. They're going to probably score very high on the SAT, the verbal part of the SAT or the ACT. There's also interpersonal intelligence. These are people who are really good at understanding people. They tend to be really high in empathy. If you have high interpersonal intelligence, you will make a fantastic therapist. People who are good counselors and good therapists, they're highly intelligent in understanding people. Like from the time they were very young, they sort of watched people and found people fascinating and liked to understand what made them tick and get together. And they tend to be very empathetic. So that's going to give you high interpersonal intelligence. You'll make for a great therapist. Another kind of intelligence that Gardner recognizes is intrapersonal intelligence. This is knowing about yourself. Are you good at understanding who you are, the skills that you're good at, the things that you need to work on, the things that excite you, the things that depress you? If you're in a bad mood, do you know what to do to get yourself in a good mood? If you're depressed, do you know what to do in order to sort of shake that feeling of depression? If you're anxious, do you know what to do to calm yourself down? If you're good at this, you're good at knowing who you are and what you need to do to regulate your emotions and to regulate your behavior so that you can meet the goals that you want to meet, then you're high in intrapersonal intelligence. Gardner also recognizes intelligence, a form of intelligence that he calls naturalist intelligence. These are people that are really good at identifying and classifying patterns in nature. So I think my brother is probably really good at this. When we were kids growing up in the Boston area, we would spend hours and hours in the backyard. We sort of had like a little creek that was near our backyard. And I loved finding the tadpoles and frogs and things like that, and sort of almost playing with them or watching them and observing how they moved and how they stayed with other frogs, and I found that fascinating. But he was real interested in classifying all of the different types of frogs and types of tadpoles that were in the creek, and also the types of trees and bushes that were near the creek. He would be able to identify very quickly what type they were, where I'd sort of be like green. And my categories were like, that one makes me itch, that one doesn't. But he'd classify them. He was so fascinated in trying to organize them and make sense of them, and get to know the names of them and identify which kinds are what and what do they grow into and how they'll change. So naturalists are people who seem to have this natural knack for identifying and classifying patterns in nature. And then the last kind of intelligence that Gardner talks about is spatial intelligence. These are people who are really good at moving things in space. So these are people who are great at maps. They're good at architecture. They're great at puzzles. If you're good at puzzles, then you're going to score really high in spatial intelligence. Some of the IQ tests include some spatial intelligence where they'll have you rotate objects in your mind, and they'll ask you how good you are at that. So Gardner's multiple intelligence identifies these 8 different kinds of intelligence and says that you can be intelligent in any or all of these and different levels. And again, most of us in psychology now like to think of these as, yes, there's some aptitude that you're born with in each of these, but a lot of these you can grow in and get good at by trying and doing it. So you might be born with a very small amount of musical intelligence, but if you're someone who loves the piano and grows up in a family where people are playing the piano around all the time and you take piano lessons and you work really hard at it, you're going to look just like in behavior, like someone who has a high aptitude in music intelligence, but maybe hasn't worked as hard as you have. So it's just this combination of working and growing and using your curiosity and desire to get good at something will make you more intelligent in it. And so you'll be just as musically intelligent as someone who was born with an aptitude for it, but never got their hands near a piano. So music, so again, for the exam, what you're going to want to be able to do is identify the names of each of these. So if I tell you how Nancy really picks up dance movements really very quickly, and she's really good on the track team, what kind of intelligence does she seem to have aptitude for, according to Gardner's multiple intelligence? And you would need to be able to recognize in the multiple choice question that that's bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Okay, so we have now covered the first few slides, and on Tuesday during class, I'll begin by talking about IQ, the intelligence quotient. We'll finish the intelligence chapter, and I'll review for the exam because your exam is Thursday. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, or you can put it in the Blackboard course shell under the discussion questions, and then I'll answer them so everyone can see the answer. I look forward to seeing you in class on Tuesday. Thank you.